Hello again, and in this tutorial we're going to look at the number formatting options you have within individual cells. You might be wondering why you'd want to do that. Well, we're going to go through the options here and explain those. So what I have on the screen here is just some random numbers I've typed in now just to explain what I'm doing. They don't mean anything particular, there's numbers I've typed in. If you want to follow along, you can use whatever numbers you like. It'll all make sense. And at the moment all these are set to general. So if I click on here, it says general up here, and if I right click and go to format cells, you can see it's also still set to general. I'm going to come back to this pane in a minute, so let me cancel out of there. But you can see here, if I click on here, I've got all these other options I can use. So what we're going to do is go through these in turn and explain why you'd want to use them. So general means no particular formatting. It's not doing anything with your number that it needs to. It's just going to display as you typed it. I could type 565 and it's just going to show the same number. It doesn't matter what I type. So you may be wondering why we've got a number option. Well, it's to do with the control of decimals. For instance, if I take my 500 there, if I choose say equals my 500 and choose to divide that by a small number, let's say 6. Yes, it's done the calculation for me and it is absolutely correct. It's 83.3 recurring. But if I have a long spreadsheet, or if I'm trying to deal with lots of numbers all over the place, I might not want to get to that degree of granular number of decimals. So what the number formatting does is it lets you control how many decimals you actually need. So if I change this to number, by default it only uses 2 decimal points. Now you can change this, but you can instantly see how that gives you some greater control over what you're doing. It doesn't, by changing to number, it doesn't mean you can't type anything else in there. For instance, if I change this cell to number, I can still type letters in and it makes no difference. But what it does do is control the number of decimal points that are allowed. Now if you want to change that, all you need to do is right click, go to this format cells option. You see it's on number, and you can just turn the number up or down as you want to, and it gives you an indication of what it will look like. Here you can also tick this box here if you want to, if you've got large numbers, to put the comma in on every third digit to separate the thousands. So you can just change it there. Let me just change that back. Okay. So the next one we have in the list is currency. So let's say here I have £100 and I have £250, I have £1,000. Oh no, £1,000, and then a big number, £50,000. Lucky me. And in fact, what that's done is it picked up formatting that I had before. So let me just change that to currency. So what currency does is it literally puts in your currency symbol before the number, and of course you get the decimal points as well. And if I right click that and go to my format cells, this by the way gives you more granular control over the number format than what you get up here. This menu up here just gives you those options, or there are some underneath, whereas this way with a right click gets you to all these options as well. So what the currency option does, it gives you the decimal point control, which you generally only want that at 2, and what symbol you want to use. So I'm in the UK, so I'm using the pound symbol, but you can change this to any symbol you want. So there's lots and lots of dollar signs, and if you keep scrolling down, you've got all the different euro symbols. They're all the same obviously, but they've got one for each country with using the euro, and then some further afield symbols as well, and then a lot it's just got letters for. So but there we go. Let me click off that. Now you notice there's also the accounting format. So if I select these and go up here and choose accounting, all it really does is take your currency symbol and push it to the other side of the cell. And this is really just an aesthetic thing, and you'll generally see this used in things like annual reports and balance sheets and things like that, where they're trying to keep this symbol in line rather than wiggling all over the place depending on how long the actual amount is. The operation you can do with them and how it behaves is exactly the same. It literally is with the formatting change where the currency symbol goes. There is some degree of control of the decimals as well. You can see that it kind of indents slightly from the right hand side with the counting, gives it a slightly better look, but it's very much an aesthetic thing. So next options that we have short date and long date. So if I type a date, let's say 13 of the 4th, or let's go back in time, 2012. There we go, 13th of April 2012. Simple as that. And what it's actually done is it's interpreted, it's worked out, Excel has worked out that that is a date. It knows 2 digits, 4 digits, it's probably going to be a date when you separate it with them by the slashes, and you can see it's actually changed the number format for me. But if I had that date and then say the next day, and I'll use my little icon here to drag that down to the end of the month. There we go. Now if I had lots and lots of dates in my spreadsheet, obviously I've got a fairly short number here, but you can see how this would be quite difficult to read if you had, say, a whole year of days listed in a column or even in a row. So if I take that, equal that, now it's picked up at the preparation I did before, so let me just come out of that. If I change it to, interestingly, if I change it to general, it doesn't know that's a date anymore. It just gives me a number how it's best interpreted it. So if I change that to short date, it's replicated it. So let me just drag that down to replicate all those. There we go. But in the case of where I'm talking, where you may have a report you want to do, and you want those dates to be easier to read in a long list, what you can do is just change that to long date, as you may have just seen a moment ago, and it gives you that more human readable date option there. Again, this is auto formatting. It doesn't affect what you can actually do with it. It's just the way they look and feel. So next on the list we have time. So time, let's say it's 10, oh no, 42. Oops, typed that correctly. 42. 1042. Excel has picked that up as I'm trying to do something with the colon, because you use the colon when you're summing ranges and things like that. So it's not quite sure what to do with what I've written there. So it's changed the formatting to custom. We're going to come to custom a lot later in the course, so don't worry about that now. It's just trying to make a best guess of what I'm trying to do. But if I then change that to time, it literally gives me that 3-point format. Now if I type something like 10 colon 45 colon 30 seconds, still it doesn't quite know what I'm doing. It can't work out that that is a time that I'm writing. So it changes that to a custom because it's trying to work out what those colons are doing. So again, I can change the time. You can see it's done that there. Interesting, as a small aside, if you ever want to put the time and date in, you can click on a cell and type equals, brackets, now, bracket, and that's not worked, because that's not what I wanted to type in. I wanted actually today. Oh, that's not working. That's because it's on general. Long date. Well, that's not working for some reason, and I may have to do an addendum video to work out why that wasn't working. It was in preparation, but don't worry. There's what I'm trying to show is there are a couple of formulas you can type in to give you the time and date, which were working a moment ago. So I need to go work out what I've done with my formatting, but I'll do a supplementary video to explain that later on. Going back to our list, what else do we have? We have time percentages. So I've set that to percentages there, and if I say that's 10%, see, it inserts the percentage symbol automatically for me. So if you want to do percent calculations, let me just get rid of these times there and change those back to general, because it makes it a bit easier. So I have 10% there, and let's say I have 100 of something. So if I want to work out what 10% of that is, all I need to do is type equals what I want to work out what 10% of it is times my 10%, and obviously that's coming out as 10. So if I wanted, I could change that to 15%, and it gives me the right number. So if I change that back to 10, and similarly if I change that to 150, that should come to 15. There we go. Fairly self-explanatory, and we're delving into how you do percentage calculations ever so slightly there, but it does give you a quick indication of how the percentage formatting works. Incidentally, you can just change that to fractions, and that's the next one on the list. I'll change that to fraction. Now it's saying 0 because by default the fraction setting doesn't include enough digits. So if I right click that, again go to my format cells, it's set to fraction, and you see it says up to 1 digit, which is no good for the fraction it's trying to calculate. So I change that to up to 2 digits. There you go, 1 in 10, same as 10%. So if I want to, I can change that between percentage. There we go. Just indicating there the contents of the cell aren't changing in terms of what happens mathematically. It's just the way it's been presented on screen, whether you want it as a percentage or do you want it as a fraction. And by and large these days, especially with Excel, you want to be representing things as percentages. It's just a bit easier to read. By having things as fractions, let me just change that back again. Up to 2 digits. That could be misinterpreted as a division, which of course is the same as a fraction, but it just leads you to potentially misread what that's actually doing. So by default, I like to leave them as percentages. It's easier to read that way. Next on our list, we have scientific. So this is literally just when you're dealing with long numbers. So if I type in some random digits here, make quite a long number. And you can see Excel has worked out what I've done. It's worked out that's a very, very long number. So let me just take some elements out of that. There we go. So there's just a longish number that I've typed in. But if I wanted to, I could change that to scientific, and it gives me the scientific notation. So if I had lots of long numbers, this should just be a way of cutting down the length of the cell contents. And if I have my scientific head on, that would make more sense to me than it does right now. There we go. So those are the general options. There is also this text option there, which just is literally turns it into text, which would mean a lot of calculations wouldn't work on numbers all of a sudden. You tend to want to turn things to text when you're trying to remove any other formatting that might have been on that cell, on those contents. So there we go. So just looking through some of these other options, let's just go to this format cells again. So general we've been through, and this is another handy thing to do, is you can go in here and it gives you this description. It explains what these different formats do. So again, general format cells, no specific number format. Number is used for general display of numbers. Currency and accounting offer specialized formatting for monetary value. So it's leading you on to what should be next if you're working your way through it. And as we said, number you tend to use when you want to limit the number of decimal places used. Currency and accounting, as we looked earlier, very, very similar. It's mostly to do with the way that the currency symbol and where it appears, and there's a bit of padding to the right hand side. Date, you can see now you can change the different date formats. So you can see that if you wanted to, you can adjust the way your short date format actually appears. Similar with the time, you can have it in 24 or 12 hour with the PM on it, those kind of things. Percentage is very self-explanatory, and how many decimal points do you want on that percent. Fraction we looked at a couple of times, so by default it's having only 1 digit. You could have it as 2, 3, 16ths, those kind of things. I think that goes all the way to hundredths. Yes it does. There we go. Scientific, again, decimal place and scientific notation. Text is just plain text. Special, you should rarely come across. Special is to do with items from other locales, and if you're getting involved in locales and you don't want to be involved in this just yet. And then custom. Now custom is different number formats that we might be using, and you can see there's quite a few in here that you can call on. We're going to cover custom number formatting a lot later in this course, particularly in a dashboard that we do towards the end, so I'm not going to go through that right now because that could just lead to some confusion. We don't need to touch it just right yet. So that was number formatting, and we'll move on to the next tutorial. Thank you very much.